Junko Partner. That's a beat I never will forget as long as I live. My name is Charles Otis, better known as Honeyboy. Very fortunate to have grown up in a place like New Orleans where there's so much music around. I grew up listening to some of the greatest drummers I think there is on the face of this earth. And I learned a lot watching a lot of them, like drummers like Lil Bibbs and Mr. Saeed Frazier, and the list goes on. There's so many of them, and Ed Blackwell, the great Earl Palmer. Well, that beat I played, Junko Partner, a million and one drummers in New Orleans will play Junko Partner. That's the original beat that was played on it, but it was played with two sticks, but I have my own way of playing. I played it with one drumstick in my hand. And in fact, I have my own style of playing. I don't play like anybody. Well, that particular tune, I went on the road with a guy who came through New Orleans back in the 50s by the name of James Wayne. Went up to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, which is about 87 miles or something like that from New Orleans. I thought we were going to have to walk back home, but fortunately enough, we scraped up enough money to get back to New Orleans. So that's why I said I'll never forget that beat. And the next thing that I'm going to do, when I was about 9 or 10 years old, my parents brought me up to a tent in New Orleans, back on Thalia and Broad. There was a preacher down there called Reverend Utah Smith. This guy used to come out with two wings on. And he used to sing, "Oh, I got two wings, I got two wings." I'm going to play some sanctified drums now, what I learned from being around Reverend Utah Smith's church. That's what you call sanctified. That's sanctified rhythm. That's the way they played it back in the church back there. Each and every time I pick up a pair of drumsticks, I have to think back. The very first pair of drumsticks I ever had in my life was fashioned from my grandmother's mop handle. I cut the handle off my grandmother's mop and made drumsticks. I used to live on New Orleans, in New Orleans at 1409 Annette Street, where we have down there what they call alleyways. I used to walk through the alleyway beating on the side of the house with the drumsticks. Fortunate enough, she didn't give me a spanking or anything. You know, she just let it go like that and went and bought another mop. There was a theater in New Orleans called the Palace Theater, which was a colored theater at that time, and I used to go around to the Palace Theater, and they had vaudeville shows there. Some people call it stage shows, and there was a drummer that played there about it. His name was Joe Morris. His real name was Joe Morris, but everybody called him Boxhead Joe. And I always remember Boxhead Joe because, like the drummers would have on their hi-hats, they would put felts on their hi-hats, but Boxhead Joe never did put felts on his. He used to take a spool that thread came off of and put on there. Well, anyway, I used to go to the Palace. I used to hear a beat like this. Well, I'll tell you one thing. The girls had to dance. You know, they had to dance to that kind of beat. And Boxhead Joe made them dance. I used to live right next door to one of the famous Barberan brothers. Anytime you mention the name Barberan in New Orleans, that automatically meant drums. Mr. Lucian Barberan lived next door to me, and his son and I, his daughter, we were raised up together. And I used to hear Mr. Lucian playing something like this on his snare drum. That was Mr. Lucian Barberan, and his brother, Mr. Louis Barberan, lived right around the corner on Robinson Street. And he had some kids, too, that we were raised up together. Mr. Lewis, one of the great all-time New Orleans drummers. He used to play military marches for his son and tried to show him how to play marches because his son was in a Catholic school band. He used to go to a Catholic school called Corpus Christi. Well, he used to show him a military rhythm, something like this. That's what he would play. There's so many great drummers out of New Orleans. The program wouldn't be too long. This wouldn't have time enough to acknowledge everyone. But getting around carnival time, like in New Orleans, there's a big day, Shrove Tuesday, some people may call it. It's called Mardi Gras. And I was very fortunate to play with a guy down there called Professor Longhair. And he played a tune called the Mardi Gras in New Orleans, and the drum rhythm was something like this. Mardi Gras in New Orleans. The Dixie Cups. Some ladies came up to New York when I came to New York with Joe Jones. They did a tune called Iko Iko. The rhythm on that was something like this. Iko Iko. The Neville Brothers, the great Neville Brothers, had a tune out. I'd like to play the rhythm for that for you. It's called the Mardi Gras Mambo. But like I said, I have my own style of playing, and for the Mardi Gras Mambo, it's a term I use. I'm not going to play it the way they played it. I'm going to put a tuxedo on it. We'll dress it up. Tuxedo and bow tie on the Mardi Gras Mambo. Mardi Gras Mambo. If you should be walking around New Orleans, the people in New Orleans, they'll parade at the drop of a hat. I even knew a lady had a parade for a baby's christening. I'd never heard of that in my life. They have parades for funerals. They have these social clubs where they have parades, and this woman had a parade for a christening. Can you imagine that? Well, anyway, if you should be out around the Treme section, you might have seen a drummer down there during that time by the name of Mr. Saeed Frazier marching along the street. He'll beat something like this. Called the second line beat. It's called the second line beat. You got that, it was derived from the people walking on the side of the band. So it's actually self-explanatory. You have the band, then you have the people on the side of the band, which makes up the second line. I played with Dave Bartholomew down there. In fact, I played with just about everybody in New Orleans. I played with Dave Bartholomew, great Professor Longhair. I recorded with Bass Domino, Sherlyn Lee. Traveled all over the country with the great Lloyd Price. I was drafted in the Army from 1953 to 55, and I was kind of drug about being drafted in the Army at first, but some of the greatest musicians I played with in my life, I played with in the Army. After getting out of the Army, I played with a guy by the name of Eddie Bo. Played with Melvin Last Day on Bourbon Street for 2 years. I played with guy by the name of Bill Senegal. I played with Frogman, Henry, just about everybody down there. And I played with Joe Jones. I traveled all over the country with Joe Jones. We backed up people like Sam Cooke, Smiley Lewis. And later on, I traveled also with Bill Senegal. We backed up people like Brooke Benton, Jerry Butler, and so many people. LaVon Baker, we backed up. I played just behind about every artist there is, rhythm and blues artist there is. And with Joe Jones, we backed up Sam Cooke, Amos Milburn, Charles Brown, and Bobby Charles. And I came to New York with Joe Jones, and we did some records with the Dixie Cups, and the list goes on and on. I played with so many different people I'd be talking to next year sometime. But then came a group down there called the Meters, and way before the Meters, we had a certain beat that we played on the drums called Funky Butt. This is my the way I play Funky Butt. That's the way I play Funky Butt. And then this next beat I'm about to play is a thing from the Mardi Gras Mambo, which was recorded by the great Neville Brothers in New Orleans. Like I said, each and every drummer have their own way of playing. I have my own style of playing, and what I intend to do with the Mardi Gras Mambo is put formal attire on it, tuxedo and bow tie on the Mardi Gras Mambo. Mardi Gras Mambo. If you should be out around the Trim East section, you might just be, during that time, you might have had a chance to see Mr. Saeed Frazier parading along behind the Jolly Boys or something, playing a beat something like this. Called the second line. When I was about 9 or 10 years old, my parents brought me back to this sanctified tent. It was a tent. They had a sanctified preacher back there they called Reverend Utah Smith. In fact, that was the first time I'd ever seen an electric guitar in my life. Reverend Utah Smith used to play this guitar, and he also used to come out with two big wings on his shoulder. And he sang a song about, oh, I got two wings to fly away. You know, well, this is what the type of rhythms that were being played back in that sanctified tent. Sanctified, sanctified. Everybody would be up on the floor dancing and screaming and hollering. Reverend Utah Smith running around with two wings on, and you know, a lot of people at that church really believed he could fly. You know? I'm glad he didn't take a chance at it, though. It's Mardi Gras time in New Orleans. Mardi Gras morning, you might hear something like this, the sound of a tambourine. Somebody say, oh, the Indians are coming, the Indians are coming. And you might hear the Indians down in New Orleans on the 7th Ward doing something like this. Two-way Parkaway. Big Chief is coming. And when they say the Big Chief is coming, that means a whole lot because them chiefs down there be pretty on Mardi Gras Day. That's what I'm trying to tell you. And
what we're doing is a close-up on the toothpick right now. So you might want to, I don't know, just keep playing. Just keep playing.
I started off playing with the late, great Professor Longhair. Bought my first union card when I was about 15 years old. I played on records with Longhair. Then I played with Dave Bartholomew. Played with, and while I was with Dave, I made records with Fats Domino, Sherilyn Lee. I played with Lloyd Price. I got drafted in the Army. And when I came out of the Army, the first person I played with was a guy by the name of Edwin Bocage. We call him Eddie Bo. And we recorded a tune back in 1955 that was called I'm Wise, Slipping and Sliding. And Little Richard, we had a hit on it, territorial hit. Little Richard came along and took it and ran with it. I played with Frogman Henry. I traveled with Frogman. I traveled all over the country with a guy by the name of Bill Senegal. We backed up people like Brooke Benton, Jerry Butler, LaVon Baker, just about everybody there is, Big Joe Turner. And I played with Joe Jones. We backed up Bobby Charles. We played behind Amos Milburn and the great Charles Brown. And we backed up Sam Cooke. Just about every artist there is to be played with, we backed them up at some time or another. And I came to New York with Joe Jones, and we played on records with the Dixie Cups and so forth. But right now, I'd like to play just one of the beats that real nasty, what I call it, there's a low-down, dirty beat, that's all, that was played around New Orleans back in the 50s. The kind of beat that make anybody want to get up and dance. A man with no legs want to get up and try something. Want to get up and try his number, you know. And what I call a low-down greasy beat that I played on some records with people around here in New York, these blues artists. I just call it old greasy beat, a pork chop beat, I call it. All right. This is a beat that come from around Cajun country. Call it a Cajun beat. Cajun beat. Actually, crawfish beat, I should say. It's a beat that people up around Opelousas and all those kind of places eat crawfish too. I'm gonna have to do it again. It's a little beat I heard when I was a kid. I used to follow certain clubs around at Mardi Gras time. I'm not going to say what we call it down there. I'll just play it. The backbeat played a very important part in rhythm and blues. And one of my mentors, the great Earl Palmer, is responsible for that. God bless him. He played on so many records, and this is one of the things I remember him playing, something like this. Speaking of, I have to mention the late, great Ed Blackwell, and actually this guy was the guy that actually influenced me to play drums. When I first went to Booker T. Washington, I was really into basketball until I heard Blackwell play. And after I heard Blackwell play the drums, I started taking music. And me and Blackwell got to be pretty close. And I remember when I was playing with Lloyd Price traveling back in the 50s, I was out in California. He and I used to practice together in a shed that he had at his aunt's house. And this man used to practice. He idolized Wilbur Hogan so much he used to practice with a picture of Wilbur Hogan on the table. And I really miss him something awful because every time he would come to New York, we'd hang together. One of the greatest drummers of all time, Ed Blackwell. And I'd like to say to anybody that want to play drums, I have my own way of speaking. You know, some things you may not even find in the dictionary because I come up with my own terms. When I say playing drums is like a cleansing. Get it all out. And another thing I'll say, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I'll say it 1,000,000 times if it's necessary. You could go to all the music conservatories in the world. You can study all the music you want. There's a lot of people all over the world trying to play New Orleans-style drums. If you haven't followed those parades around and been around the Jolly Boys or those people like that, you can't play that beat. I don't care how much music you can play, how many conservatories you can play. Now, you might be able to, I've even seen some people even write it out, note for note, and can play it. But there's only one thing missing, the feel. There's no feel there. Every time I pick up a pair of drumsticks, I can't help but think back. My first pair of drumsticks were fashioned from a mop handle. I cut off my grandmother's mop handle and made drumsticks. When I lived in the 7th Ward on Annette Street, the houses have what you call an alleyway. I took the two mop handles, and I'd walk alongside the house beating on the house. Lucky enough she didn't give me a spanking or anything, you know. Just awfully sorry she's not around today to see how far I've gone with the mop handles. I've been fortunate enough to play all over the world. These drums have been a blessing to me. It kept me from going to Korea when I was in the Army. I got drafted in the Army. I took a couple of weeks basic training. I played in the Army band. I was in special services. These drums have did wonders for me. And by the way, I've gone to A&P 1,000,001 times from these drums, too. They keep something in the gut, too, you know. And for all the young kids out there that want to play, you don't have to cut the handle off of a mop handle, a broom or something like that. You go out and get your nice pair of drumsticks and practice, and you might get a chance to travel all over the world, too, someday. Who knows? And, in fact, there's so many young drummers down in New Orleans right now which have gone all over the world already. So many of them. I call New Orleans Drummers Paradise because they have some of the greatest drummers in the whole world there. And I used to say they were 10 cents a dozen, but that's no longer. They're 2 cents a dozen. And I'm talking about great drummers. All of them can play. And they make you pat your feet. That's what the whole thing is about, patting your feet. Mardi Gras time once again. Some girls down in New Orleans recorded a tune called Iko Iko. It was recorded originally by James Sugar Boy Crawford, I believe in giving credit where it's due. But later on recorded by the great Neville Brothers. I even recorded it myself in Germany. Iko Iko. Iko Iko. It's called Mean to Me. Mean to Me. This is called Mean to Me, a little thing that rigged up when I was in 7th Army Special Service with the great Lou Blackburn, and along with John Wright and a few other people. Oh, yeah, all right. Well, had a ball playing, and just like I said, these drums have worked miracles for me, you know. For one thing, I'm really glad they kept me from going to Korea. That's number one. Kept that rifle off my shoulder. When I was in the Army, I played in the bands and lucky enough to play in special services. I didn't have to shoot anybody or anything like that. So that's about it, you know. Everybody take good care of themselves. That's all I got to say.